I have 5 different first and favorites. So the first book I read from an author and then my favorite book from that same author. So let's talk about them. Hi, I'm Lacey. I love to read. Thanks for coming to my channel. I love to read a lot of different genres. So I picked 5 different authors that I love, a lot of different books by them. And then I decided to come here and show you my first book that I read by them and then my favorite book that I read by them. So we have a romance author, we have a literary fiction author, we have a historical fiction author, we have a fantasy author, and then we ended off with a thriller author. So let's get into the video. So we're gonna start off first with Kennedy Ryan. Kennedy Ryan is an amazing romance author. She's one of my favorite romance authors that I've ever read books from. She just writes the most tension-filled books that are just so beautiful and always so layered and never just about the romance. And so the first book that I read by Kennedy Ryan was Real. This is a special edition I got from Steamula. It's so beautiful, like, it is so beautiful. But this was the first book that I read by Kennedy Ryan. This book is 432 pages and I rated it 5 stars. As you can tell, I started off with a bang with Kennedy Ryan. This book follows Neva, and she is a Broadway understudy who then gets casted in a biopic by Cannon, who is a director. It follows their love story, but also her career in film and his directing, and I just loved this book. It is such a beautiful book. I know it's 5 stars, but it really isn't even my favorite of her books, but it's a favorite because it's just such a beautiful read. And Kennedy Ryan just does amazing layered books, and this was the perfect way to get me obsessed with her books. But my favorite is Before I Let Go. This book is 391 pages and it's also 5 stars. This book is about Josiah and Yasmin, and their marriage is almost at its end. And they're still intertwined in a lot of ways through their children and their business, but through all the things that life has thrown at them, they have just grown so far apart, but something just starts pulling them back together. And time really heals and brings them back together in such a beautiful way. And I just love this. It's a second chance romance, obviously. And I just love Kennedy Ryan's writing. Almost all of her books that I've read have been between 4.5 and 5 stars for me. And so I really just love throwing myself into her books. And I know that these are the type of romance that you're going to get a lot out of, but also you're gonna feel a lot, which is something I love, but definitely not always for the faint of heart. So just keep that in mind if you pick up any of her books. Moving on to literary fiction, I have my favorite author, which is Frederick Bachman. He writes the most quirky, heartwarming, just beautiful displays of human emotion and humanity, honestly, in general. But I have my first book, which was A Man Called Ove. This book is 337 pages and I rated it 5 stars. You're gonna see a theme that I very specially picked a lot of my favorite authors, so a lot of these books, the first one hooked me and that's why I kept reading them. But this book is about a very, very grumpy man named Ove. Some people call him Uwe. I'm just gonna pronounce it Ove because that's what my brain says. Ove. He's a very, very grumpy man. He's one of those stereotypical old people who are like, get off my lawn. Like, that is Ove. He is grumpy, seeing everyone. He gets annoyed with people walking in outfits that he doesn't like. He hates when people have a different type of car than his preferred country engineered. And his life kind of goes in a different direction when a couple move in next door with 2 young children. And it is just the cutest, sweetest book about a grumpy old man turned into, honestly, a part of their family, which is just so beautiful. A Man Called Otto is the movie adaptation to this. Super cute, but the book is just so amazing. Just the way Frederick Bachman writes his stories is just so different and I love it. So that book hooked me. I became obsessed and it brought me to my favorite book ever. My favorite book ever, which is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This book is 341 pages. It's 5 stars. Like I said, it's my favorite book that I've ever read. I just think the way that Frederick Bachman writes just speaks to me on a whole nother level. And I know I'm not alone in that, and that is why I just love his books, and I do need to read his newest one, but we're not there yet. Anyways, this book is about a bank robbery gone wrong, which turned into a hostage situation at an apartment viewing. So that's where you are. You get the cop's perspective. You get every person in this hostage situation's perspective and feelings. And it's just the most beautiful display of humanity and how everyone feels. I'm like, why am I gonna cry? I'm okay, but I just love this book so much. I think this book really changes your mindset on how you treat people and what people have gone through their whole life and how each different person, there's something like that you can find and love in each person. I just love this book so much. I think that this is the most beautiful book that I've read, and there's so many things I think about, and now I want to go reread it because it's just that good. But we're not gonna make a whole video just right now. This video is not specifically about this book, but I just love this book so much. So this is my favorite Frederick Bachman favorite book. But you cannot go wrong with Frederick Bachman, ever. Every single one of his books I've read, I've loved. Move on to the next author. I'm talking about an historical fiction author. I picked Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love her books. I think her books are some of the most accessible historical fiction books that I've ever read. And by accessible, I just mean the way she writes is so captivating that you get into it so quickly, which I think is a really hard thing for some people with historical fiction, is you do sometimes have to get through the history part and get into it, and then you can get into the story. And a lot of people hit that wall and stop reading, and I feel like Taylor Jenkins Reid does a great job of engaging you from the start so that you want to keep reading. And she got me into historical fiction, and I'll always be appreciative of that. So the first book that I ever read by Taylor Jenkins Reid was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. You've probably seen this. This is a very popular book. It's 389 pages and I rated it 4 stars. This book is about Evelyn Hugo, which is a very famous movie star, but she's very private as well. And she doesn't do a lot of interviews. She doesn't tell a lot about her personal life, even though a lot of it was shown throughout her career. So she gives an exclusive interview to a magazine reporter named Monique, and she gets to interview her not only about her movie star life, but also about her 7 husbands. It's such an interesting book. The way it's written is each chunk is a husband. It's such a good book. It's really engaging. It's really interesting. You kind of get this glamorous behind the scenes life of a movie star, which is really fun. And I know and understand why a lot of people really enjoyed it, because it just was entertaining, and that's what I think Taylor Jenkins Reid does such a great job with. However, my favorite is actually not a lot of people's favorite, but Malibu Rising was my favorite, and I think because it was so character driven, and although I think a lot of her books are character driven, these characters, I just love them, and I love the dynamic of the 4 siblings. So this book was 369 pages and I rated it 5 stars, and this book follows actually one of the husbands from The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. His name is Mick Riva, and he has 4 children. And so this book is about those 4 children. 2 are surfers, 1 is a photographer, and the other is the youngest, still figuring out her life. And it details a 24-hour span during Nina, the oldest sister's famous party. And so you kind of get a lot of that glamour as well, because there are a lot of movie stars, a lot of famous people in this book, obviously fictional, but you know what I'm saying. And I just love the humanity of different people and all the things that people are going through, even though you don't know. And I just think this book was such a great, engaging read that I still think about, and I read a long time ago. The next genre we have is fantasy, and I've only read 1 fantasy series, and so that's why I wanted to include it, because I think it's really fun to do a lot of genres, but this is the only fantasy I've read, so I'm definitely excited to read more and always open to suggestions and recommendations. But I read ACOTAR, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I ended up finishing the whole series. So the first book I read obviously was A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is 419 pages, and I rated this 4.75 stars. I think this is a really fun way to get into fantasy. This book is about Feyre, and she is hunting to survive, and she ends up killing a wolf, which catapults her life into a fairy world. And so because she killed that wolf, a magical beast came and took her to a fairy land because she kind of had a debt to pay by killing him. So she ends up in Perithian and ends up in the Spring Court with Tamlin, who is the High Lord of that court. She has to do whatever it takes to save Perithian. It is really enjoyable. Honestly, I did not think I would like it as much as I did. I thought it was just so fun. I know a lot of people said the first one was kind of boring, but I found it really interesting, but it also was my first fantasy, so I think that also has something to do with it. But I really enjoyed this book, and that tied me into reading the entire series. And my favorite of the series was A Court of Mist and Fury. This book is 626 pages and I rated it 5 stars. So this is the second book in A Court of Thorns and Roses. Also, this is a spoiler, of course, because it's the second book, but Feyre is now High Fae in the Spring Court with Tamlin. But as time goes on, her bargain with Rhysand has to be upheld. And so she goes kind of back and forth between the Spring Court and the Night Court. And it is so good. Chapters 54 and 55. Everyone knew what they were talking about, but this book was so fun and there was so much tension and so much longing and beautiful scenes in this book, and I just really enjoyed it, and it kept me reading the whole series, which is exactly the point of it. And then the last genre I have is thriller, and so I picked Ashley Winstead, and I've read a few books by her, and the first book I read by her is Midnight is the Darkest Hour. This book honestly was not my favorite. It was 385 pages and I rated it 3.5 stars. This book is about Everett and Ruth, and they are friends who are trying to figure out what happened with this skull that was found in the swamp in their very small religious town. But oh my goodness, the amount of Twilight talked about in this book. I swear this book is like 40% Twilight, talk of Twilight, and 60% of the rest of the book. It is just so much about Twilight, and I was very confused. Sometimes reading it, like, what is this about? I feel like I'm literally just listening to a girl talk about how much she loved Twilight. So keep that in mind. However, do not let that stray you from Ashley Winstead books, because In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, I loved. This is my favorite book by her. This book was 345 pages. I rated it 4.5 stars. This book is about 6 friends who go back to their college for a 10-year reunion, but some of those friends cannot let go of the death of one of their other friends who was a part of the group 10 years ago. And so you're uncovering a lot. It's very layered. There's so many people. It's actually not confusing, which is something that is usually a downfall to when there's so many different perspectives, but I actually thought this was really good and engaging and clear, and I just was on the edge of my seat. And so this book, amazing. The other books I've read by her I really liked. Just that first one luckily did not turn me off, because I actually really loved her books. So those are all the books I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching this video and coming to my channel. I'd love to hear some of your favorite authors and then what your first book and favorite book from them are. It's always so interesting to see which books start you off and how that factors into your favorite. I always love to hear what people's favorite books from specific authors are, because it's always so interesting to me, because you might not have the same favorite ones, but you can all agree that you love an author, which is really fun. But thank you so much again for being here. I really appreciate your support, and I hope that the books that you're reading are bringing you joy.